Welcome back. Today we're going to do a preview for a brand new game from Floodgate Games. This is called Holi Festival of Colors, based on an ancient Indian tradition of throwing powder or colors up in the air and basically splaying them everywhere. It's a beautiful tradition. Actually, it just took place in India in March 9th and 10th of this year.
Yeah, in fact, this is also spread across the world as well, and lots of people celebrate this. And in fact, it's also inspired some of those runs you may have seen where people are using colored powders to throw up into the air.
It's a very cool looking game as well. You're going to notice 3 different levels that you're going to be splaying your colors onto the board and trying to gain points depending upon the level that you're on. So it is a 3D board.
Yes.
Also, you're going to have color tokens in front of you. These are the things you're going to be laying out on the board. Depending upon where you're moving and where you're throwing them, that's done with the cards in front of you. Each player has a set of cards that is going to be their player color and denote where they can throw their colors. Plus, there's going to be a communal deck that players can also draw from.
Yeah, and on the board itself at the beginning, each player is going to have one of their tokens in the corner space on the first floor, as well as these sweet tokens that are placed on the first and second levels of the board.
The game is quite simple to play and to teach. On your turn, you're going to take a number of different actions. However, each of them can only be taken once. One of them is mandatory, the other ones are optional. Moving is one of those options that you can take, and as David alluded to, each player is going to start on level 1 in the corners. You're going to be using your cards to decide where you want to throw your powder, but before or after you do so, you can move. Moving can be done anywhere, and what I mean anywhere, you simply pick up your token and move it to any place on the lower level. That's going to allow you to throw those patterns of color into the air and have them land on the surface.
Yeah, moving is quite strategic, and we'll get into these cards in a second, but you're going to want to position yourself for those for sure. Like Jeremy said, though, you're going to be moving on the level that you currently exist. And when you move, you can go to literally any space on there. Now, there are some guidelines. You can't go into a space where another player's token is, but you can go into these places that have these sweet tokens. In fact, you may want to, because you're going to collect those sweet tokens and potentially score some points if you have a lot of them by the end of the game. You can even go into a space that has someone else's color token. When you do that, you're going to take their color token into your supply. That's going to stay in your supply for the rest of the game. That's not a good thing. That's going to give them 2 points at the end of the game. You can go on one of your colors, but mostly you're going to want to go into a space, if possible, that is not occupied by anything, but it puts you in a good position to throw some color.
And to throw color, you're going to use one of the cards in your hand. Each player is going to start with 1 card of their color, possibly more depending upon your player position at the start of the game. However, at the end of your first turn, you'll always have 3 cards to choose from. Let's talk about throwing color. When you throw color, you're going to be able to use one of those 3 cards in your hand. One of the positions on this grid, and it could be a 3x3, it could be a 3x4, or something else, has to be your position on the board. But what I mean by that is you're going to simply look at this card and rotate it into any position that you so wish, knowing that one of these has to be where your meeple currently resides. That's because you're not going to throw color in that particular position. So say, for instance, I was right here. I could use this card to be this, or this particular icon, throwing powder into those other areas or colors into those other areas, such as there and right there. Those are going to give you points at the end of the game. Now, you can throw color if you want to be mean onto other players, and that's important because that's how you can get your colors into other players' piles. And you actually get a bonus from that. If you are able to hit someone, you're going to put 2 of those into their pile instead of just the 1 from them landing on it.
Yeah, that's one very interactive way of scoring some points and getting some of your tokens into someone else's supply. Now, that's moving and throwing color. What we didn't talk about is how these other levels come into play. And before we do that, we need to talk about climbing up. One of the things, and the other of the 3 actions that you can do, is to climb up. And again, you can do these in any order. So you could move, you could throw color, you could climb up, or you could start with climbing up. But to climb up, you need to be surrounded with color tokens adjacent orthogonally on the level that you're on. If that's the case, you can simply move up to the space directly above you. One thing you've got to keep in mind, if someone's already done that and they're right above you, you cannot do that. Also, you have to keep in mind if someone's put color above you, you're going to move up and take that token as well. So there's some definite jockeying for position to get up to the next level.
And why do you want to ascend? Well, that's because you want to throw your colors on higher levels because they're worth more points at the end of the game. On a subsequent turn, if it comes back to me and I'm at this higher location, I'm going to look at those cards that are in my hand at that given time. Again, doing the same type of action as I would before, looking on which one of these I want to represent my particular person and where I want to throw those colors. However, when you're on a higher level up, you have to look directly down through the board and see where those colors may fall. That's because each of these colors, if it doesn't have a color below it, will fall through those levels until it gets to that base level. In this case, if I use this diagonal and I look down below, well, I could land right onto David, boom, throwing more color onto him, and this one would actually fall into a position below with nothing on it. If there is something on it, it will land on the level that you are, and that's important because at the end of the game, everything on the bottom level is worth 1 point, and then 2 points, and then 3 points for the higher levels up that you go.
Yeah, that brings even more strategy the higher you go, because you're going to want to try to position yourself along with your cards so that your color doesn't fall as much, because you're going to be getting far more points with the 3 points on top.
Now remember, you may also be wanting to go to these locations that have sweet tokens. These are important to collect through the game as well, because at the end of the game, you're going to get a multitude of points if you have more of those than other players at the table. And this is going to continue around the table until the end game conditions are met. And this can happen in a multitude of different ways. Number one, if 2 color piles are gone from the game, that's going to trigger the end. If there are 2 color decks that are gone, that's also going to end the game. Also, any combination of those two could also end the game as well. And you're going to finish out that round so each of the players has the same number of turns. Before we get into how the points work at the end of the game, let's also talk about this deck, because this is another deck that you can choose from. At the end of each of your turns, you're going to be able to use one of those cards obviously on your turn. However, you can draw one of the cards from your own deck or one of these particular cards. Now, the unique thing about these cards is that they have a lot of different types of combinations, but they're a lot harder to do than your base cards in your deck. And the reason why they're multicolored is because that just shows that anybody can use their color for them. So it gives you a lot more point scoring opportunity, but they are more restrictive the longer that you play in the game, because a lot of those spaces are already going to be filled with colored tokens.
Yeah, a lot of players are going to be going for those cards, and in fact, those end game conditions are tied to that as well. That can be one of the decks that runs out that helps you trigger the end of the game.
Speaking of the end of the game, again, these are how points are going to work. Each of the color tokens that you have on those levels are going to score you points, either 1, 2, or 3 points at the end of the game. And then you're going to score for the sweets that are in front of you. If you have more sweets than other players at the table, you're going to get 5 points for each player that you beat. So if I have the most sweet tokens and we're playing in a 4-player game, that's 15 points for me. Each other player is also going to get points if they have more than other players at the table. So it's another way in order to score points.
Yeah, and don't forget too, the last bit of points are those tokens from other players in your supply. I have these 2 blue tokens. That's going to be 4 points, 2 points each for Jeremy at the end of the game.
So that is Holi Festival of Colors. It is a really unique game with a really cool theme. It's all about being spatially aware of where you are, using the right combinations of cards, doing movements, your actions, and ascending at the right time, and then trying to actually be mean at times, which I like because you are throwing your colors onto other players, which means that sometimes you're not putting them on the board, but you're putting them directly in the other player's side. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below, subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do. And make sure you guys go to the campaign page to see all the final components. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.